I was about to leave my wife's boss's party. Then I heard something that changed my life forever. Julian Thorne's voice sliced through the mahogany door of his private study. So, Paul, absolutely correct. Your Titan Minerals makes a donation of $10 million to our Clean Rivers project. It's fully tax deductible. And then the foundation hires your subsidiary construction company for implementation in Ghana. He paused, laughing softly. Permits from local officials? Consider them handled. This isn't a bribe, Paul. It's synergy. Brilliant synergy. Your reputation after that forest clearing scandal will be whiter than snow, and we get budget and fantastic photos for our annual report. Elena, she knows nothing and needs to remain in the dark. She's our perfect engine, honest, hardworking. She makes all of this function. I stood frozen outside the door, the glass of scotch in my hand forgotten. The air seemed to have been sucked from my lungs. Each word hammered against the glass construction that was my wife's world. Synergy, engine, needs to remain in the dark. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The gleaming skyscraper penthouse, with its panoramic views and carefully curated art, suddenly felt like the set of an elaborate con. I needed to think, I needed a plan. Because Julian Thorne had made one critical mistake. He assumed Elena was just a useful tool, a passionate figurehead with no connections. He forgot she was married to someone who dismantled fraudulent operations for breakfast. Julian Thorne's parties were like his foundation, glossy, expensive, and permeated with an atmosphere of self-importance. We stood on the terrace of his penthouse overlooking the night city, and the air seemed thick with self-satisfaction. Around me, people were discussing saving the Amazon rainforest and Tesla stock prices with the same reverent tone. For them, charity was just another form of social capital. I, Alex, felt like a surgeon at a homeopath convention. My job is cold calculation, risk management, and identifying weaknesses in business models. I listen to people who promise to change the world and understand within 5 minutes whether they have anything beyond good intentions. Usually they don't. But my wife Elena was different. She was genuine. When she talked about her Clean Rivers project, her eyes lit up. She wasn't playing a role, she lived it. She believed in Julian, in the foundation's mission, that they were truly making the world better. And despite all my cynicism, I believed in her. I saw how she worked until night, how she arranged logistics for delivering filters to remote villages, how she fought for every dollar in the budget. She was the heart of this organization. And Julian, he was its face, smiling, tanned, perfect for magazine covers. Alex, you look like you're analyzing their quarterly reports again, Elena whispered, touching my arm. Relax, it's just a party. I'm trying, I replied, kissing her temple. But I'm tired of listening to an oil magnate talk about his love for solar panels. I think I'll head home. Are you staying longer? Yes, I need to talk to Mr. Henderson about a new donation. Don't mope without me. I nodded, hugged her one last time, and headed for the exit. To reach the elevator, I had to pass Julian's library, a huge room of dark wood lined with leather-bound books. The door was slightly ajar. I wasn't planning to eavesdrop, but Julian's voice, quiet and confident, made me stop. He was on the phone. The moment I overheard Julian's conversation, the entire evening came into sharp focus. Earlier, I'd been watching him work the room, champagne in hand, moving from one wealthy donor to another with practiced ease. He had this way of making each person feel like they were the most important ally in his environmental crusade. I'd always found it a bit theatrical, but effective. Now I understood it wasn't theatrical, it was literally an act, a performance designed to separate the wealthy from their money, not for the rivers and forests he claimed to champion, but for his elaborate shell game. I walked out of the building, got into a taxi, and my mind was already forming a plan. Julian Thorne had made one mistake. He thought the engine had no brains. But he didn't account for the fact that this engine had me. Where to, sir? The taxi driver asked. I almost gave him my address, then changed my mind. Financial District, Crawford Building. This late? He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I need to pick something up from my office, I said, already pulling out my phone. The taxi pulled away from Julian's gleaming tower, and I started making notes. Names, connections, dates. I needed to document everything while it was fresh in my mind. By the time we reached my office building, I had the outline of what would become my investigation. The security guard looked surprised to see me at this hour. "Working late, Mr. Mercer?" "Just need to grab some files, Stan. Won't be long." In my office, I accessed our company's financial database. If Titan Minerals was making backroom deals with the Blue Earth Foundation, there would be a paper trail somewhere. Our firm might not have direct access, but I knew where to look for breadcrumbs. 2 hours later, I had a preliminary sketch of Julian's scheme and a growing sense of disgust. When Elena returned home, I was already at the computer. She was glowing. "Can you believe it?" Henderson agreed. "Another $5 million for clean rivers." I forced myself to smile. Right now, I couldn't tell her the truth. It would destroy her. She would charge at the breach, cause a scandal, and be crushed by the system Julian had built over years. No, my revenge had to be surgical, not emotional. "That's wonderful, darling," I said. "You know, I've been thinking, with the amounts flowing through your foundation, you need impeccable financial protection. Let me help you analyze the reports, just to ensure everything is transparent and no one can accuse you of anything." Elena looked surprised but agreed. For her, it was a sign of my care. For me, the beginning of war. Elena put her purse down and moved closer, studying my face. "What's this sudden interest in nonprofit finances? You've always said charity balance sheets put you to sleep." "That was before my wife became executive director of a foundation handling millions in donations," I replied smoothly. "Besides, with donations the size of Titan Minerals coming in, there's bound to be extra scrutiny. I just want to make sure you are protected." She tilted her head, still suspicious, but softening. "That's actually really thoughtful, Alex. Julian has a whole finance team, but I suppose another set of eyes couldn't hurt." "Exactly," I said, kissing her forehead. "Just being supportive." I spent the next 2 weeks immersed in the Blue Earth Foundation's public reports. It was similar to my job, only the stakes were personal. I was looking for anomalies, and I found them. Construction contracts awarded without tender to firms owned by donor companies. Huge donations that strangely coincided with these same donors receiving favorable government permits in regions where the foundation operated. And most importantly, Titan Minerals. 3 months before their donation, they lost a lawsuit and received a massive fine for polluting a river in South America. And now they were to become the main contractor for the Clean Rivers project. This wasn't just hypocrisy, it was mockery. I compiled everything into one file, but the evidence wasn't enough. I needed to make the system attack itself. I needed a Trojan horse. My office became a command center for Operation Transparency, as I privately called it. During the day, I maintained my regular venture capital work, evaluating startups, attending board meetings, making investment decisions. But nights and weekends were dedicated to my investigation. Monica, my assistant, started giving me concerned looks. "Alex, you're working yourself to the bone. Is everything okay?" "Just a complicated deal," I told her. "High stakes." She clearly didn't believe me, but knew better than to press. "You've got that look," she observed, "the one you get when you're taking something apart." She wasn't wrong. I was methodically dismantling Julian Thorne's empire, piece by piece, looking for the structural weaknesses that would cause it to collapse. The deeper I dug, the more extensive the corruption appeared. Julian had built an impressive network of mutually beneficial relationships with corporate executives, government officials, and even other nonprofit leaders. The foundation served as a central hub for a sophisticated influence trading operation disguised as philanthropy, but I still needed more. Internal communications, project details, bidding processes. I couldn't ask Elena for access without raising suspicions. That's when I remembered Duranya Sharma. 3 years ago, my firm had considered investing in her water filtration startup, but ultimately passed because the profit margins in humanitarian technology were too thin for our portfolio. I'd been impressed with her technology, though, a revolutionary system that used locally available materials and required minimal maintenance. Exactly the kind of innovation the Clean Rivers project should be using. I started searching. I needed a small but innovative water purification company. Crystal honest, with technology impossible to ignore. and I found it. Aqua Vitas. Run by Dr. Anya Sharma, a brilliant engineer who developed a mobile filtration system 10 times more effective and 3 times cheaper than what the foundation was using. I called her office the next morning. Dr. Sharma's office, a young man answered. This is Alex Mercer from Apex Ventures. I'd like to speak with Dr. Sharma about a potential opportunity. There was a pause. Mr. Mercer, I believe Apex passed on investing in Aquavitas 2 years ago. Circumstances change, I replied. And this isn't strictly about investment. 20 minutes later, Dr. Sharma called me back. Alex Mercer, she said, her voice cool and professional. What can I do for you? I'd like to meet in person if possible. I have a proposition that could be beneficial for both of us. She laughed, a short, skeptical sound. The last time we met, you told me my technology was a brilliant but financially unviable. What's changed? My perspective, I said honestly. Can we meet tomorrow? Lunch, perhaps? After a long pause, she agreed. Cafe Meridian, 1 p.m., but I'm giving you exactly 30 minutes, Mercer. I met with her under the guise of a potential investor. I told her about the Blue Earth Foundation grant and helped prepare an application. It was a masterpiece. We outlined not just the technology, but also the social impact and media potential. We engaged several journalist friends who wrote a couple of enthusiastic articles about Aquavitas. We made the application so good and so public that Julian Thorne couldn't reject it without causing a scandal. Just to be clear, Dr. Sharma said as we finalized the application in a quiet corner of the cafe, you want me to apply for a grant from your wife's foundation, operate with complete transparency, and insist on following every best practice in the industry? Precise, I confirmed. Your technology is superior to what they're currently using. Your company has an impeccable reputation. You deserve the grant on merit alone. And the fact that this might create problems for certain people at the foundation is just a happy coincidence. Her dark eyes studied me intently. A very happy coincidence, I admitted. Think of it as bringing light into dark corners. If everyone at the foundation is operating ethically, your transparency won't be an issue. She leaned back, crossing her arms. There's something you're not telling me. I considered how much to reveal. Dr. Sharma wasn't just brilliant, she was ethical to her core. That's why I needed her. The foundation may be involved in some creative accounting, I said carefully. Nothing I can prove conclusively yet, but if there are improprieties, your company's involvement could help expose them without a messy public scandal that would hurt the actual environmental work. And your wife, where does she stand in all this? She's innocent, I said firmly. She believes in the mission. She's being used. Dr. Sharma studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I've wanted to expand Aquavitas's work in Ghana anyway. But Alex, if I find out you're manipulating me for some venture capitalist power play, I'll make sure everyone knows it. I'd expect nothing less, I said, extending my hand. She hesitated, then shook it firmly. Let's see where this goes. And he took the bait. Aquavitas received a small pilot grant. The Trojan horse was inside the walls. Now the interesting part began. Under my instructions, Dr. Sharma started acting strictly by the rules. Her team demanded complete transparency. We can't start work without an independent audit of the site, she told Elena during online meetings. This is standard procedure for quality assurance. We want to publish weekly progress reports on our website, she added. This is a requirement of our internal transparency statute. Julian started getting nervous. His shadow schemes couldn't withstand daylight. An independent audit might reveal that the land for the project was allocated with violations. Public reports would prevent him from manipulating figures. So Aquavitas insists on complete independent verification of all water quality metrics, Elena told me one evening, clearly frustrated. Dr. Sharma says it's non-negotiable. I kept my expression neutral as I looked up from my laptop. Sounds like solid scientific protocol to me. Of course it is, Elena sighed, dropping onto our couch. But Julian is having a meltdown. He called it excessive bureaucracy and a waste of valuable resources. Interesting reaction, I observed carefully. Does Aquavitas know something he doesn't want them to find? Elena frowned. I don't think so. but I could see doubt creeping into her mind. The truth was, Dr. Sharma was following my carefully crafted script to the letter. Every email, every report request, every transparency measure was designed to put pressure on the weakest points of Julian's corrupt system. And it was working. Do you remember that section in the Foundation's annual report about setting the gold standard for NGO transparency? I asked, keeping my tone conversational. Of course, Elena replied. Julian wrote it himself. Well, it sounds like Aqua Vitas is just holding you to your own standards, I said. Maybe Julian should be thrilled that a grantee is so committed to the Foundation's values. Elena was quiet for a moment. I'm going to request the financial breakdowns for our last 3 Ghana projects, she said finally, just to see if there's anything unusual. I nodded, carefully concealing my satisfaction. That sounds prudent. One evening he summoned Elena to his office. She told me about it later. Elena, he began in his velvet voice, this team from Aqua Vitas, they're too bureaucratic. They're slowing down the process. Can you talk to them? Tell them to be simpler. But Elena was ready. I had prepared her. We had rehearsed this conversation several times. Julian, I can't, she replied calmly and firmly. They're acting strictly within our own Foundation's charter. Section 4.2, transparency and accountability. If we pressure them, it could look bad, especially after those articles about them in the press. On the contrary, we should set them as an example. Julian was trapped. He couldn't argue with rules he had written himself. He saw he was losing control, and it enraged him, but he could do nothing. The Aqua Vitas project became a bright spot against his murky dealings. The confrontation between Elena and Julian was far more heated than she initially revealed to me. She came home that night with red eyes and a slight tremble in her hands. I assumed it was just the stress of challenging her boss, but later that night I found her sitting on our bathroom floor, crying silently. Elena, what happened? I knelt beside her. Julian threatened me, she whispered. Not directly, but he made it clear that if I kept pushing the transparency issue, I'd regret it. He said I was biting the hand that feeds me, and that loyalty is remembered, but betrayal is never forgotten. My blood ran cold. Did anyone else hear this? She shook her head. We were alone in his office. The door was closed. I pulled her close, my mind racing. Julian was getting desperate, which meant our strategy was working. But I hadn't anticipated he would threaten Elena directly. This changed things. I'm not backing down, she said, wiping her eyes. If anything, this just confirms something is wrong. Why would he react this way to simple transparency measures unless he has something to hide? You're right, I said, helping her up. But we need to be careful. Document everything. Don't meet with him alone again. And if he makes any more threats, even veiled ones, we take it to the board immediately. What I didn't tell her was that I was already formulating a backup plan. If Julian tried to harm Elena's career or reputation, I would go nuclear. Take everything I had directly to the major donors, the press, and the authorities. It would likely destroy the Foundation in the process, but I would not let him hurt my wife. The next day, Elena called me from her office. Alex, can you look at something for me? Her voice was tense, controlled. Of course, what is it? I'm sending you the contractor selection documents for our last 5 projects. Tell me if you notice anything strange. The files appeared in my inbox moments later. I already knew what I'd find, but I examined them anyway. Elena, every major contract has gone to companies affiliated with global construction partners, I said after a few minutes. Is that normal? No, she said quietly. It's not. And I just discovered that Global Construction Partners is a subsidiary of Highland Industries, which donated $20 million to the Foundation last year. That's quite a coincidence, I said carefully. Yes. And when I asked Julian about it, he said I was being naive about how the real world works. Her voice hardened. He told me to stay in my lane and focus on program development. What are you going to do? I asked, though I already had a good idea. First, I'm going to personally review every major contract from the past 3 years, she said. Then I'm going to insist that all of Dr. Sharma's transparency recommendations be implemented foundation-wide. I smiled to myself. Elena was doing exactly what I'd hoped. using her position and integrity to challenge Julian's corruption from within. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. Julian had spent years building his system. He wouldn't let it collapse without a fight. That night, I met with an old friend from business school who now worked as a financial journalist. We met at a quiet bar far from both our usual haunts. "This is all very cloak and dagger, Alex," Mike said, sliding into the booth. "What's going on?" "I need information," I said, "about Julian Thorne and the Blue Earth Foundation." Mike raised an eyebrow. "The golden boy of environmental philanthropy? What about him?" "I have reason to believe he's using the foundation for some creative accounting. I need to know if there have been any whispers, any stories that got killed, any journalists who started asking questions and then suddenly stopped." Mike took a long sip of his beer. "You're asking if other reporters have been looking into Thorne and got shut down?" I nodded. "Interesting you should ask," Mike said slowly. "About 6 months ago, Vanessa Chen at the Chronicle was working on something about corporate donors to Blue Earth getting favorable treatment on environmental permits. The story never ran, and a month later, she took a position with a new environmental journalism initiative, funded in part by a grant from Blue Earth Foundation. She was bought off?" Mike shrugged. "Hard to say. Maybe she genuinely got a better opportunity, but the timing was convenient." "Anyone else?" "There have been whispers about the Ghana projects, cost overruns, questionable contractors. Nothing concrete enough for a story, but enough smoke to make some of us wonder about fire." Mike leaned forward. "What's your interest in this, Alex? Since when do venture capitalists care about nonprofit accounting?" "Since my wife became executive director at Blue Earth," I said. Understanding dawned on Mike's face. "Elena, she's Thorne's right hand, isn't she?" "She is, and she has no idea what he's doing." Mike let out a low whistle. "You're playing a dangerous game, my friend. Thorne has powerful allies." "So do I replied. "And I have something he doesn't, the truth." I had gathered enough evidence. I had financial reports, contract analysis, and most importantly, a living example of how the system resists transparency. It was time for the final blow. I didn't go to the press. A public scandal would destroy the foundation, which meant Julian, in falling, would take Elena's life's work with him. My goal was different: surgical removal of the cancer while preserving the healthy organism. There was one person on the foundation's board of trustees, Arthur Pennington, patriarch of an old, wealthy family that established the foundation before Julian. For him, the foundation's reputation was his family's legacy. He was my target. I prepared an anonymous package. No accusations, no emotions, just a dry, professional, reputation risk analysis for the Blue Earth Foundation. On 20 pages, I presented the facts: strange coincidences of donations and contracts, absence of tenders, Titan Minerals' connection to the environmental scandal. And as the cherry on top, a comparative analysis of the effectiveness and transparency of the Aqua Vitas project compared to other, much more expensive and less transparent projects of the foundation. The package I sent to Arthur Pennington wasn't anonymous, as I initially planned. That was another detail I reconsidered. In reality, I requested a private meeting with him, man to man. Pennington's office was exactly as you'd expect for old money: leather-bound books, ancestral portraits, a desk that had probably witnessed a century of deals and decisions. He greeted me with the polite wariness of a man accustomed to people wanting something from him. "Mr. Mercer," he said, not offering his hand, "to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" I placed my file on his desk. "I believe Julian Thorne is using the Blue Earth Foundation for corrupt purposes, and I have the evidence to prove it." Pennington's expression didn't change, but he glanced at the file. "That's a serious accusation." "It is, and I've spent weeks verifying every detail before bringing it to you." I opened the file and laid out the evidence: the suspicious contracts, the pattern of donations followed by regulatory favors, the threatening behavior toward Elena when questioned. "Why bring this to me and not the authorities?" Pennington asked finally. "Because I respect what the foundation was meant to be," I said honestly. "What your family intended it to be. Taking this to the authorities would destroy everything, including the legitimate good work being done. I thought you deserved the chance to handle this internally first." Pennington was silent for a long moment. And what exactly do you want, Mr. Mercer? I want Julian Thorne removed before he does more damage. I want the foundation to implement real transparency measures. And I want my wife's work protected. He picked up the file. I make no promises, but I will look into this personally. That's all I ask, I said, standing to leave. But just so we're clear, if anything happens to Elena, or if this is swept under the rug, my next stop is the Financial Crimes Unit at the Justice Department. Pennington's eyes hardened. Is that a threat, Mr. Mercer? It's a contingency plan, I replied. I hope we won't need it. The week between my meeting with Pennington and the emergency board meeting was excruciating. Julian seemed to sense something was happening. He became erratic, canceling meetings, closeting himself with lawyers. Elena reported that staff were whispering about financial auditors being seen in the accounting department. Something's happening, she told me one night. Julian looks like he hasn't slept in days, and he's avoiding me completely. Maybe he's finally feeling the pressure of his own corruption, I suggested, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Elena looked at me sharply. You know something you're not telling me. I met her gaze. I know that you are doing the right thing by pushing for transparency. The rest will work itself out. She didn't press further, but I could tell she wasn't satisfied with my answer. I sent the package by courier to Pennington's office. A week later, there was an emergency meeting of the Board of Trustees. Elena was also invited, but asked to wait in the reception area. She sat there for 3 hours, not understanding what was happening. And then the doors opened. A grim Julian Thorne came out of the office. He didn't look at her, just walked past. Arthur Pennington followed him out. Elena, please come in, he said. When she entered, all board members were looking at her. Julian Thorne has resigned for personal reasons, Pennington announced. We conducted an urgent internal audit and found certain discrepancies in his management approach. The foundation needs a reset. We need a leader with an impeccable reputation, dedicated to the cause and capable of restoring trust. The board unanimously decided to offer this position to you. The morning of the board meeting, Elena dressed with particular care. A power suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back severely, armor for battle. Whatever happens today, she said at the door, I want you to know that I love you, and I trust you. Those words hit me harder than she could know. I had been manipulating events behind the scenes, keeping her in the dark about my actions, all to protect her, but still without her knowledge or consent. The trust in her eyes made me question whether I had done the right thing, but it was too late now. The wheels were in motion. When Elena called me to come to the foundation later that day, her voice was tense but controlled. I arrived to find the entire office in a state of barely contained chaos. Staff members were gathered in small clusters, whispering. A security guard was clearing out Julian's office, placing personal items in boxes. Elena was in the boardroom with Arthur Pennington and several other board members. When I entered, she was sitting at the head of the table, looking shell-shocked. Alex, she said, standing, the board has just appointed me acting president. Pennington approached me, extending his hand. Mr. Mercer, your wife has accepted our offer to lead the foundation during this transition period. I shook his hand, scanning his face for any sign of what had transpired. Congratulations. Perhaps we could speak privately, Pennington suggested, gesturing to a small adjoining room. Once we were alone, his cordial demeanor cooled significantly. Julian Thorne has been removed. Your evidence was compelling. But I want to be clear about something. This was handled internally to protect the foundation's reputation, not to satisfy any personal vendetta you might have. My only concern was stopping the corruption, I said. Was it? Pennington raised an eyebrow. Because from where I stand, it looks like you orchestrated a very sophisticated takedown of a man who, whatever his faults, built this foundation into what it is today. He built it on lies and corruption, I countered. He used my wife as a shield while he ran a money laundering operation for corporate polluters. Pennington sighed. The world is rarely as black and white as you seem to think, Mr. Mercer. Julian did secure significant funding for legitimate environmental projects. Not all of his methods were orthodox, but much good was done. At what cost? I asked. The foundation was supposed to hold corporations accountable, not help them buy indulgences. And under your wife's leadership, perhaps it will return to those principles, Pennington said. She seems remarkably committed to transparency, something you clearly value as well. His tone made it clear that he suspected my role in Elena's recent push for accountability measures. I didn't confirm or deny. Will Julian face any consequences? I asked instead. He's resigned with immediate effect. His reputation in philanthropic circles is effectively finished. He's also agreed to certain financial arrangements to make amends for any improprieties. The board felt this was preferable to a public scandal that would damage the foundation's work. In other words, Julian had bought his way out of criminal charges. It wasn't justice, but it was something. And more importantly, it meant Elena could take control without the foundation imploding. And my wife, the board supports her? Unanimously, Pennington confirmed. Her integrity is unquestioned. And frankly, we need someone with her moral clarity to restore confidence among the staff and donors. When we returned to the main boardroom, Elena was already in deep discussion with two board members about reviewing all active contracts. She looked up as I entered, and I saw something new in her expression. A mixture of determination, authority, and understanding. She knew, or at least suspected, what I had done. That evening, when Elena, still shocked, was telling me about it, I felt not triumph but relief. She looked at me, and there was understanding in her gaze. She didn't know all the details, but sensed my hand in everything that had happened. Was it you? She asked quietly. I just highlighted what was already in the darkness, I replied. The rest was done by you, your reputation, your work. They didn't choose you by accident. They chose the only person they could trust. I came over and took her hands. That night at the party truly changed my life. It not only revealed the ugly truth to me, it forced me, a cynic who believes only in numbers, to use all my skills to protect what I truly believe in. The idealism and strength of my wife. I didn't just get revenge. I preserved her world and made it truly hers. Later that night, after the initial shock had worn off and we were alone in our apartment, she confronted me directly. You orchestrated all of this, didn't you? She asked. Not angry, but intense. Aqua Vitas, the transparency initiative. The meeting with Pennington. It was all you. I took a deep breath. I overheard Julian at his party. He was on the phone with someone from Titan Minerals, bragging about how they were using the foundation to launder their reputation after that pollution scandal in Peru. He called you his perfect engine, someone so honest and dedicated that no one would question what was happening behind the scenes. Elena paled. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me without proof? Julian was your mentor. You trusted him completely. She was quiet for a moment. I might not have, she admitted. And even if I had, what could I have done? Gone to the board with hearsay? Julian would have denied everything and probably pushed me out. Exactly, I said. I needed to create a situation where the corruption would expose itself, where the board would have no choice but to act. So you used me, she said quietly. You manipulated me into pushing for transparency, knowing it would force Julian's hand. I flinched at her words. I was trying to protect you, to give you deniability. If things had gone wrong, that wasn't your decision to make, she interrupted. You should have trusted me with the truth, even if it was painful, even if I might not have believed it at first. She was right. In my desire to shield her, I had underestimated her. I had done exactly what Julian did, made decisions about her life without her input, assuming I knew best. You're right, I acknowledged. I should have trusted you. I'm sorry. Elena looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. I understand why you did it, and I can't say I'm not grateful for the outcome. Julian's corruption would have eventually tainted everything we've worked for. She took my hand. But no more secrets, Alex. No more manipulating events from the shadows. If we're going to face things, we face them together. Together, I agreed, squeezing her hand. No more secrets. Now, she said, a new determination in her voice, tell me everything you know about Julian's operation. I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with if I'm going to clean up this mess and rebuild the foundation properly. And I did. I showed her my research, the connections I'd mapped, the patterns of corruption I'd identified. Together, we began planning how to transform the Blue Earth Foundation into what it always should have been, a truly transparent, accountable force for environmental good. The next morning, Elena walked into the foundation as its new president. The staff, still reeling from Julian's sudden departure, watched her with uncertainty. She called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. "By now, you've all heard that Julian Thorne has resigned," she began, her voice clear and confident. "What you haven't been told is why. The board has discovered serious ethical breaches in how certain contracts and partnerships have been managed. I want to be completely transparent with you. Our foundation has not been living up to its own stated values." A murmur ran through the room. Some looked shocked, others nodded as if confirming long-held suspicions. "Starting today, that changes," Elena continued. "We will be conducting a comprehensive review of all active projects, contracts, and donor relationships. We will be implementing new transparency protocols across the organization. And most importantly, we will be recommitting ourselves to our true mission: environmental protection and justice, not reputation management for corporate donors." A young program officer raised her hand. "Will there be layoffs?" "No," Elena said firmly. "This is not about punishing the staff. The vast majority of you have been doing incredible, meaningful work. This is about ensuring that work isn't compromised by corruption at the top. If anything, we'll be expanding certain teams, particularly in compliance and program evaluation." Another staff member spoke up. "What about the Titan Minerals project in Ghana?" "An excellent question," Elena said. "The Clean Rivers project will continue, but with significant changes. We'll be expanding our partnership with Aquavitas, whose filtration technology is both more effective and more cost-efficient than our current systems. And we'll be opening the construction contract to competitive bidding from qualified local firms, rather than automatically awarding it to Titan's subsidiary." By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere had shifted from anxiety to cautious optimism. Elena had managed to acknowledge the corruption without implying that the foundation's entire mission was compromised. She had offered a path forward that built on the organization's strengths while addressing its fundamental weaknesses. As the staff filed out, Dr. Sharma approached Elena. "Congratulations, Madam President," she said with a slight smile. "It seems transparency is back in fashion." Elena gave her a knowing look. "I understand I have you to thank for helping expose some of our inconsistencies." Dr. Sharma glanced at me, standing nearby. "I believe in letting the data speak for itself. It's not my fault if the numbers revealed uncomfortable truths." "Well, I hope you are prepared for a much deeper partnership," Elena said. "I want Aquavitas technology deployed across all our water projects, with proper attribution and fair compensation, of course." "I look forward to it," Dr. Sharma said. "Though I must warn you, I'll be just as demanding about transparency with you as I was with your predecessor." Elena smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Over the next few months, Elena transformed the Blue Earth Foundation. She implemented a public dashboard showing the progress and financial details of every project. She instituted a blind bidding process for all contracts over a certain threshold. She created an independent review board to evaluate the environmental impact of potential donors. Not everyone was happy with these changes. Several major donors threatened to withdraw their support when told they could no longer dictate how their gifts were used. 2 board members resigned in protest when Elena insisted on publishing conflict of interest disclosures for all leadership. But for every corporate donor who walked away, 3 genuine environmental supporters stepped up. The foundation's work became more focused, more effective, and more transparent. Staff morale soared as they realized their work was no longer compromised by backroom deals. 6 months after taking control, Elena was formally appointed as the permanent president of the Blue Earth Foundation. At the ceremony, Arthur Pennington publicly praised her unwavering commitment to the foundation's core values and her courage in facing difficult truths. As we celebrated that night, Elena raised her glass to me. "To the man who changed my life by leaving a party early." I smiled. "To the woman who took a corrupt system and transformed it through sheer force of integrity." "We make a good team," she said, "even if your methods are occasionally questionable." "I'm learning," I admitted, "from the master of doing things the right way." Elena's expression grew serious. "The foundation is offering me a seat on the board, a position with real oversight power. I'd like you to take it." I stared at her surprised. Me, the cynical venture capitalist? On the board of an environmental foundation? Exactly, she nodded. We need your skepticism. Your ability to see through facades and follow the money. Just think of it as due diligence on a massive scale. I considered the offer, using my financial acumen to advance actual environmental goals rather than just maximize profits. It was appealing in a way I hadn't expected. I'll do it, I said, but only if we fully disclose our relationship. No appearance of impropriety. Already in the paperwork, she assured me. Complete transparency, remember? 2 years later, the Blue Earth Foundation had become a model for nonprofit governance. Elena's leadership was featured in case studies at business schools. The foundation's projects were delivering measurable environmental improvements with unprecedented efficiency and accountability. Julian Thorne had vanished from public life. Rumors placed him on a private island in the Caribbean or consulting for corporations under a different name. His downfall had been quiet but complete, exactly as I'd planned. As for me, I found myself changing in ways I never expected. My work on the foundation's board had awakened something that my years in venture capital had buried, a sense of purpose beyond profit. I still maintained my day job, but I had started an impact investment fund focused on environmental technologies. Dr. Sharma's Aqua Vitas was one of our first investments. One evening, Elena and I stood on the balcony of our apartment, looking out over the city lights. She leaned against me, contemplative. "You know what Julian's biggest mistake was?" she asked. "What's that?" "He thought idealists couldn't also be strategic, that believing in something makes you naive." "A dangerous assumption," I agreed, pulling her closer. "The most dangerous," she said, looking up at me, "because now we have both the moral high ground and the keys to the kingdom." I kissed her, feeling not just satisfaction at winning a complex game, but genuine hope. Hope that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys could win.